Hi, so this part of the presentation is going to be talking about adding standardized scales to closer discovery. During the presentation, we're going to be exploring what standardized scales are, the benefits and challenges of using them within research, the aims of the standardized scales projects. We're going to present the standardized scales pages on discovery, and then we're going to be talking about our future plans. So what are standardized scales? They are a collection of related questions that measure an underlying concept. They're tested to measure a concept when appearing in a specific order and when being administered with a specific wording every time. Scales are validated against specific populations. For example, the Edinburgh postnatal depression scales has been validated against new mothers to assess postnatal depression. And all scales have multiple versions, but more specifically, all scales have original versions, and some of the additional versions are validated, but some are not. So these are a couple of examples of standardized scales that we have in Discovery. This is the original paper for the generalized anxiety disorder scale, which we'll see later in Discovery. And this is the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale that we've just seen. As you can see, both of them have the questions in a specific order. So what are the benefits of using standardized scales? In primary research, when building a new questionnaires, scales are a ready-for-use tool. They don't need any extra work from the researcher, and they can be sure that it's been validated to measure what it says it does. This saves them time and money, as they won't have to spend any resource having to create a new set of questions. Adding standardized scales to one's primary research also allows for comparison with the other researchers' work, as long as they use the same version of the scale. In secondary research, which uses data that's been collected by a third party, when scales are involved, the researcher won't have to spend time looking for the questions they need to produce the data of interest, as they will know that the standardized scales used are measuring that already. So in this case as well, standardized scales allow for comparisons of phenomena across different samples, different questionnaires, different studies as well, as long as, again, the standardized scale used are of the same version. There are also challenges of using standardized scales. In primary research especially, finding the scales in the first place is a big challenge. That's because gathering information is very time consuming. Some scales are old and they may not have a persistent identifier, which makes it extra hard to find the papers. Even with a persistent identifier, the process is lengthy and research intensive, as the first paper that one finds is often not the original paper. Once the original paper is found, there is no guarantee that it will have or it will provide a comprehensive list of the questions that the scale has. And if it does, it might not have the questions in full sentences. That's because often these questions are behind a paywall and require permission to be accessed. It makes it harder for researchers to actually know whether they want to use the scale first before paying. Another challenge of using scales in research is when using secondary data, and that's because locating the scale is not easy. Metadata records in secondary research is rare to find, and when it's present, it's not up to date or thorough. Often the presence of the scales and the location of where it can be found is not recorded, and one might have to ask the study. And the study may not have the information of which version of the scale is present. So the researcher will have to go in and manually look for which questions of that scale are used. Information on scales is scattered across several platforms and is not recorded consistently. Websites do not have a list of where these scales are used across a set of studies, so which makes it harder to use standardized scales for comparison between the two, between like two samples or two questionnaires. An additional challenge is that studies often make their own versions of the scale, but don't record it. That means that they may add some extra questions, they may subtract some questions, but again, the researcher will have to go in and check that manually. That leads to the researcher's strain. So currently, each individual researcher, when using secondary data, will have to firstly determine if there is a scale used in that data, then find the information about the scale, which is the citation and the question, with the challenges that come from that we've spoken about earlier. Then they have to locate the questionnaire with the scale within the questionnaire, identify which version is used in that questionnaire, and then find the data set that actually contains the scales variable. That process has to be repeated for however many questionnaires the researcher is actually looking into, which makes comparison even harder to achieve. So what's Closer Discovery doing about this? Closer Discovery aims to do the hard work of researching and gathering all this information on standardized scales for the researchers. To do so, we have gathered up-to-date comprehensive information of the scale citation, provenance, and version, which hasn't been done before, as well as where these scales are used within Closer Discovery's questionnaires and datasets. By publishing structured information in our website, Closer actually offers the possibility to have all this information publicly available at the user's fingertips. So moving on to our standardized scales page, here you can see our main page, which has the definition that Closer has given to standardized scales at the top. Below that, there is a table with information about the 10 scales that are currently in discovery. We are planning on adding more in the future, so please give us feedback if you have the chance to use the page, as we can use it in the future. The table that you see here on the left, we have the standardized scales titles. In the middle, we have the summary, which highlights the topics covered by a scale and how many questions compose it. And lastly, on the right, we have the full citation and the provenance when possible. So if we click on any of the titles in the left column, we then get into the individual pages. Individual pages are split in two. The first part contains all the general information. So as you can see here, we have the generalized anxiety disorder scale that we've seen before. Here you can see first there is the title. Below that, there is the summary, which is the same as in the table from the previous slide. And below that, there is the reference or citation with the provenance. The question list table in this part of the page has on the left the question number, which follows the original paper's numbering and chronology. Then we have the question column with the question texts, and then we have a column with the original version of the scale. After that, we have the different versions that the studies may use, if there are any versions other than the original one. So here you can see that we have recorded which of the questions from the original version the studies use, as many studies create their own versions of the scales, and this information is often not found anywhere else. So onto the second part of the individual page, you can see that there is a table that outlines the use of standardized scales in closer studies. So right now we are seeing the default order of the table, but it is completely customizable by version, study, year, or questionnaire. So in default mode, the scale are ordered firstly by version, then they're ordered alphabetically by study. After that, they're ordered chronologically by year, and then again alphabetically by questionnaire. So our future plans. In the future, we are planning to keep the standardized scales that are in Discovery updated, and keep updating them to the closer when new studies are added to closer discovery. We are also planning on adding more standardized scales to closer discovery, and adding the standardized scales as actual questionnaires in the closer discovery website so that the questions are searchable and documented within DDI. Once this is done, we will be able to link the questions in the studies questionnaires directly to the questions in the standardized scales of which they're based. Does anyone have any questions?